Poppy fell asleep before we reached the first exit out of Ashford Hills. Her yellow blanket had slipped off one shoulder, and one of her pink sneakers was resting upside down near the cup holder in the back seat. The plastic dinosaur she had carried into my parents' house was still clenched in her hand, its green tail pressed against her palm as if she had been afraid someone might take that from her too. I kept both hands on the steering wheel. The highway was mostly empty. It was Thanksgiving night, a little after 9:30, and the rain that had threatened all afternoon had finally started. Fine drops gathered on the windshield, then disappeared beneath the wipers in steady arcs. For the first 10 minutes, I did not turn on the radio. I listened to the tires against the wet pavement. I watched the red taillights ahead of me stretch and blur. I counted the exits between my parents' house and Brookhaven Row because I needed something that could not argue with me. At exit 14, Poppy stirred. "Mommy?" Her voice was thick with sleep. "Yes, baby." She pushed herself upright in the car seat and rubbed one eye with the back of her hand. "Did Grandpa stay mad at you?" I looked at her in the rearview mirror. The overhead highway lights passed across her face in quick intervals. Light, dark, light, dark. "No," I said. Grandpa was upset. Adults sometimes say things when they are upset that are not fair. She looked down at the dinosaur in her hand. "Did I do something bad at Grandma's house?" My hands stayed completely still on the wheel. "No, Poppy. You did nothing wrong." She looked toward the window. "Uncle Corbin said I was loud." Uncle Corbin was wrong. That answer seemed to settle something in her. She pulled the yellow blanket over herself again and leaned her head against the side of the seat. A few minutes later, she was asleep. I kept driving. The worst part was not what they said about me. It was realizing my daughter had heard every word. For years, I had made small excuses for my parents because that was easier than naming what they did. My mother had a sharp tongue, I told myself. My father believed in discipline. Corbin was under pressure. Everybody had difficult seasons. That was the vocabulary I had used to make their behavior sound temporary. But there was nothing temporary about the way my father had looked at me across that Thanksgiving table. He had not been angry because I embarrassed Corbin. He had been angry because I had said something in front of witnesses that he needed kept quiet. The first transfer had been $380. It appeared on the joint household account I shared with my parents because, 2 years earlier, I had agreed to help them manage a few bills after my mother had surgery on her wrist. My father called me on a Tuesday afternoon in late July and said the charge was for an emergency plumbing repair. The kitchen line backed up, he told me. Corbin had a guy come out. I remember the exact wording because I wrote it down in my notes app while we were still on the phone. Emergency plumbing repair. The next transfer was $265. Then $410. Then $190. Each one carried a vague description. Home supply. Repair reimbursement. Cash advance. Each one passed through Corbin's account before disappearing somewhere else. At first, I assumed my father was helping him quietly. That was not unusual. Garrick Bennett had always treated Corbin's mistakes as weather. Something inconvenient, something unavoidable, something everyone else needed to prepare for. Corbin missed rent payments, and Dad called it a rough month. Corbin lost a job, and Dad called it a bad manager. Corbin borrowed money from family, and Dad called it temporary. But when I cross-referenced the transfers against the household bills, the numbers did not match. The plumbing company had never received $380. There was no repair invoice, no canceled check, no receipt attached to the family ledger. There was only money leaving. By the time I turned onto Brookhaven Row, I had already stopped asking whether I was overreacting. My apartment building stood at the end of a quiet block lined with brick townhouses and bare maple trees. Most of the windows were dark. A single television flickered behind the curtains across the street. I parked, got out, and opened Poppy's door. She did not wake when I unbuckled her. She was warm and heavy against my shoulder as I carried her upstairs. Her dinosaur fell from her hand on the landing. I picked it up, tucked it beneath her blanket, and laid her in bed without turning on the overhead light. Then I stood in her doorway for a moment. Her nightlight cast a pale blue glow across the room. There were crayons on the floor, a stack of library books beside her bed, and one tiny sock caught beneath the edge of the dresser. Nothing in that room belonged to my parents. Nothing in that room belonged to Corbin. I closed the door. The apartment felt colder after that. I walked into the kitchen, set my keys beside the fruit bowl, and opened my laptop. The fan began its familiar low hum. Blue-white lines of numbers filled the screen. For months of statements. For months of transaction histories. For months of watching money move through Corbin's account in pieces small enough that no one expected me to notice. I opened the folder I had hidden beneath an ordinary name. Household receipts. Then I pulled the small recorder from the inside pocket of my coat and placed it beside the laptop. The device was no larger than a pack of gum. It had captured my father's voice clearly. Apologize to your brother or pack your things and leave this house. I listened once. Then I stopped the recording. I opened the hall closet. And I took out a suitcase. Poppy was the only child I would ever have. Her father, Adrian, had died 3 years earlier on a wet November morning when a delivery truck crossed the center line outside Charlottesville. He had been 32. Poppy had been 9 months old and still waking twice every night. By the time the police officer came to my door, I had already learned how to carry her on one hip while answering work emails with my free hand. After Adrian died, I handled everything myself. The hospital forms, the life insurance paperwork, the probate filings, the preschool enrollment, the pediatrician appointments. The custody order had been simple because there had been no one else to contest it. Adrian's parents signed the acknowledgement without hesitation. The court entered sole legal custody in my name on February 18th, 3 years earlier. That document had stayed in a fireproof folder ever since. At 11:42 that night, I took it out. The apartment at Brookhaven Row had gone quiet except for the refrigerator cycling on and the low hum of my laptop fan from the kitchen table. Poppy was asleep down the hall. I could hear the small, uneven rhythm of her breathing whenever the floor settled beneath my feet. I opened the closet and pulled out 2 suitcases. One navy blue. One small and pink, with a broken zipper pull that Poppy refused to let me replace because she said it looked like a tiny silver moon. The zipper on my suitcase made a dry, scraping sound as I packed. 2 pairs of jeans. 3 work blouses. Poppy's sweaters. Her toothbrush with the purple handle. The yellow blanket she had carried home from my parents' house. I packed slowly because I was not guessing. I was following a list. Passports first. Then Poppy's birth certificate. Then the certified copy of the custody order. Then the encrypted drive. It held 67 financial files, for months of statements, account screenshots, lender notifications, Corbin's messages, the signature comparison report, and the Thanksgiving recording. The drive was smaller than my thumb. It carried enough weight to change every person at that table. I slid it into the inside pocket of my laptop case, beside the original loan packet. The paper was thick and stiff from the lender's printer. The edge caught against my fingertip as I placed it inside. Last came the envelope my grandmother had given me 6 years earlier. It was cream-colored, soft at the corners, sealed with a strip of fading tape. Inside was $3,800 in cash and a note written in blue ink. Every woman should keep enough money to leave a room she is not safe in. My grandmother had said it while we stood in her kitchen, peeling apples for pie. I had been 26, newly married to Adrian, smiling at the time because I thought she was being dramatic. I did not smile now. At 12:16 a.m., I called Blythe Rowan. She answered on the second ring. Marlo. Her voice was alert. Blythe never answered the phone as if she had been asleep. She had practiced civil fraud law for 19 years, and she treated every late-night call as if someone had already made a mistake they could not undo. I need to leave for a few days, I said. Possibly longer. There was a pause. Is Poppy with you? Yes. Is she safe? Yes. Do you have sole legal custody? Yes. The certified order is in my hand. Has your family filed anything with a court? Not that I know of. Any custody agreement, parenting order, temporary restraining order, or active court restriction involving Poppy? No, then you are not violating anything by traveling with your daughter. I looked toward the hallway. Poppy's bedroom door was closed. A strip of blue night light showed beneath it. I'm thinking about Valencia. Blythe was silent for 2 seconds. Then she said, The Valencia you went to for that freight conference last year? Yes. You still have the address for the apartment manager? I do. Send me your flight information, the temporary address, and a scan of Poppy's custody order before you board. That way, if anyone tries to claim you disappeared, I can document that you did not. I sat down at the kitchen table. My laptop screen reflected faintly in the window. Outside, the parking lot was wet and empty. What if they tell people I ran? They may, Blythe said. People who are losing control often confuse distance with disappearance. I looked at the open suitcase. What if they say I took Poppy from them? They do not have custody of Poppy. They do not have a court order. And they do not get to use family language to pressure you into staying near people who are destroying evidence. Then Blythe said the sentence I needed to hear. You are not disappearing, Marlo. You are creating distance so they cannot destroy evidence or pressure you into silence. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Not because I was uncertain. Because I had been waiting for someone to say it plainly. I'll send everything within the hour, I told her. Good. And Marlo? Yes. Do not meet with Garrick. Do not answer Corbin. Save every voicemail. I already have. That was the truth. At 12:41 a.m., I booked 2 one-way tickets from Richmond International Airport to Valencia, Spain, with a connection through Charlotte and Madrid. I chose Valencia because I had been there 11 months earlier for a logistics conference. I had spent 4 days reviewing shipping delays, port schedules, and warehouse recovery models. On the last evening, I had walked alone through Ruzafa after dinner and noticed how the city did not seem to demand anything from me. Nobody there knew my father. Nobody knew Corbin. Nobody knew the version of me my mother had described at family dinners. I still had the business card of a woman named Marta Velasco, who managed short-term apartments for conference travelers. I had kept it tucked inside my passport cover. I found it after 2 minutes of searching. Her number still worked. By 1:03 a.m., I had reserved a furnished apartment near a small park in Ruzafa for 30 days. At 1:18 a.m., I sent Blythe an email. The subject line read, Document Preservation and Travel Notice. Attached were the Thanksgiving recording, the forged loan documents, 4 months of bank statements, 19 transaction screenshots, 14 messages from Corbin, the signature analysis, Poppy's custody order, our itinerary, and the Valencia address. The attachments totaled 67 files. I watched the progress bar move across the screen. 18%, 46%, 79%, 100. Then I closed the laptop. At the airport, Poppy slept against my shoulder while I stood near the gate with one suitcase beside each leg. Her cheek was warm against my collarbone. Her dinosaur was tucked between us. My phone vibrated. Once. Then again. Then 3 times in less than a minute. Rowena. 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 I looked at the screen. 11 missed calls. 1 voicemail. Then another. I did not open either one. At 3:57 a.m., the boarding announcement began. I placed Poppy carefully in the stroller, adjusted the yellow blanket around her knees, and rolled both suitcases toward the gate. Before we stepped onto the jet bridge, I opened my phone one last time. Rowena's latest message had appeared on the screen. Call me before you do something you cannot take back. I looked at it for 3 seconds. Then I turned on airplane mode. By the time Poppy and I reached Valencia, the sky had turned the color of old paper. We had been traveling for almost 15 hours. Richmond to Charlotte. Charlotte to Madrid. Madrid to Valencia. Poppy had slept in pieces. 40 minutes with her head on my lap. Another hour curled against the window with the yellow blanket pulled over her knees. At one point, somewhere above the Atlantic, she woke up and asked if Spain had the same moon. It does, I told her. She looked through the dark window for a while. Then she fell asleep again. Marta Velasco met us outside the terminal at 4:12 in the afternoon. She was shorter than I remembered, with silver haircut close to her chin and a red scarf tied at her throat. She carried a cardboard sign with my name printed in black letters. Marlo Bennett. I had not seen my name displayed for anyone in nearly a day. It felt strange. Not frightening. Just unfamiliar. The apartment was on the third floor of a narrow building near Razafa, 2 streets from a small park lined with orange trees. The entrance smelled faintly of stone dust and coffee. There was no elevator, so Marta helped me carry the larger suitcase up the stairs while I held Poppy's hand. Inside, the apartment had 1 bedroom, a pull-out sofa, a small kitchen with blue ceramic tiles, and a balcony just wide enough for 2 chairs. Poppy walked straight to the window. "There are trees," she said. "There are. And people with dogs." "Yes." She pressed both hands against the glass. For the first time since Thanksgiving dinner, she smiled without looking over her shoulder first. Marta gave me the keys, showed me how to work the heater, and pointed out a grocery store around the corner. Before she left, she handed Poppy a small paper bag with 2 butter cookies inside. "Welcome to Valencia," she said. Poppy held the bag with both hands. "Thank you," she said carefully. When the door closed behind Marta, I stood in the middle of the apartment for a moment. The suitcases were still by the wall. My laptop case rested on the kitchen table. The encrypted drive was inside it. Nothing had changed yet. But the distance had. At 6:43 p.m. Valencia time, my phone connected to the apartment wireless network. It began vibrating almost immediately. Rowena had called 19 times. Garrick had called 4. Corbin had called 7. There were 11 voicemails. I did not play them right away. I unpacked Poppy's pajamas first. I set her toothbrush beside the small bathroom sink. I found the dinosaur, placed it on the edge of the bed, and spread her yellow blanket over the mattress. Then I opened my laptop. Blythe had emailed at 1:17 p.m. Eastern Time. The subject line read, "Fraud complaint filed." I opened it. She had filed the formal complaint with the lender that morning. The report included the personal line of credit opened in my name, the forensic signature review, the lender's original application, and the transaction trail showing the funds moving through Corbin's account. She had also sent a preservation notice. The notice required the lender to retain all records connected to the loan application, login history, device information, uploaded documents, call recordings, verification notes, account access logs, and internal correspondence. Blythe wrote one sentence at the end of the email. The lender has placed an administrative hold on the active line of credit and requested Corbin Bennett's written explanation within 5 business days. I read that sentence twice. Then I opened the attachment. The line of credit had been frozen at $12,400. No more withdrawals. No additional advances. No way for Corbin to move the balance somewhere else and call it a misunderstanding. I set the laptop down and poured Poppy a glass of water. She was sitting at the small kitchen table, drawing on a sheet of paper Marta had left with colored pencils. She had drawn a house with a red roof, a tree beside it, and 2 figures standing in front. "Is that us?" I asked. She nodded. "Where are we?" "Spain." "Are we staying here?" "For a little while." She considered that. Then she added a 3rd figure beside us. "Who is that?" I asked. She looked down at the paper. "That's Grandma." I did not answer immediately. Poppy pressed the green pencil harder against the page. "Is Grandma still mad?" I pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. "Grandma has a lot to think about right now." "Because Grandpa yelled?" "Yes." Poppy nodded as if that made sense. Then she slid the paper toward me. "You can keep it." At 7:28 p.m., I played the first voicemail. It was Rowena. Her voice was uneven. I could hear a television playing in the background, low and indistinct. "Marlo, please call me. I do not know where you are. Your father is furious. Corbin is beside himself. You cannot just take Poppy and disappear like this. You're destroying this family." I let the message end. Then I played the next one. Rowena again. This time she was crying. You do not understand what you are doing. Your brother made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. You do not throw away your family over paperwork. I set the phone face down on the table. Paperwork. That was what she called a forged signature. A fraudulent line of credit. Money transferred through 19 separate transactions. At 8:02 p.m., Garrick's voicemail arrived. There was no crying in it. Bring puppy home. This has gone far enough. You have made your point. That was all. No question about whether puppy was safe. No acknowledgement of what he had said at Thanksgiving. No mention of the loan. Only an order. At 8:19 p.m., Corbin sent a text. I only borrowed your name temporarily. I was going to fix it before you found out. A second message followed 30 seconds later. Dad said you are overreacting. Then a third. I will pay you back. Just call Blythe and tell her to stop. I read the messages once. Then I took screenshots and saved them to the folder. Household receipts. At 8:31 p.m., I opened a new email. I typed Rowena's address. I attached the Thanksgiving recording. 43 minutes and 18 seconds. The file contained the scrape of chairs on hardwood. The clink of silverware against plates. Corbin laughing under his breath. My father's voice, low and controlled, telling me to apologize or leave. I did not write a paragraph. I did not defend myself. I did not explain why Poppy and I had crossed an ocean. For once, I did not explain myself. I gave them the truth and let it do what truth always does when it finally reaches the right people. I wrote one sentence. You asked why I left. Now you know. Then I pressed send. The message left my outbox at 8:33 p.m. 3 minutes later, my phone began vibrating again. This time, the first call was not from Rowena. It was from a number I did not recognize. And beneath it, a voicemail notification appeared from Blythe Rowan. Blythe's voicemail was 47 seconds long. I played it at the kitchen table in Valencia while Poppy sat on the floor beside the balcony doors, arranging her dinosaur, 2 crayons, and a butter cookie into a line. Marlo, Blythe said, I need you to call me as soon as you hear this. The lender sent over preliminary account activity. Corbin did not use the line of credit for household expenses, repairs, medical bills, or any emergency purpose he could reasonably explain. The money moved through 3 accounts within 48 hours. Call me. I looked at the clock on the microwave. 9:14 p.m. outside. The park near Ruzafa had gone dark except for the lamps along the walking path. A man in a navy coat crossed beneath one of them with a small white dog. Poppy pressed one finger to the window, watching them disappear behind the orange trees. I called Blythe. She answered immediately. I have the transaction chain, she said. Walk me through it. That is exactly what I am going to do. I opened my laptop. The encrypted drive was already connected. Its small blue indicator light blinked once, then held steady. Blythe began with the first transfer. On August 7th at 10:18 in the morning, the lender disbursed $12,400 into the account opened under your name. I watched the document populate on my screen. 7 minutes later, she continued, $4,000 moved to Corbin's checking account at Commonwealth River Bank. Then, 32 minutes later, $3,900 went to an account called Horizon Ledger Services. I searched the name. It was an LLC registered in Delaware 6 months earlier. The listed organizer was a registered agent company. No public owner appeared in the formation paperwork. What about the rest? I asked. $2,700 went through a payment processor account linked to Corbin's email address. The final $1,800 was transferred to a brokerage wallet under a platform called Northline Capital Exchange. I leaned closer to the screen. Northline. Yes. I knew the type before she explained it. High-frequency speculation dressed up in polished language. Options contracts. Leveraged positions. Risk disclosures buried beneath glossy promises about financial independence. Blythe sent a second document. 19 transactions. 10 weeks. The lines sat one beneath another in short, cold repetition. August 7th. 10:25 a.m. August 9th. 3:41 p.m. August 16th. 11:06 a.m. August 22nd. 2:13 a.m. Each timestamp close enough to the next to look less like a plan and more like panic. He lost nearly 68%, Blythe said. I did the calculation before she finished. About $8,400. $8,386.19. The exact number stayed on the screen. Not an emergency. Not groceries. Not a plumbing repair. Not a misunderstanding. A 10-week sequence of withdrawals, transfers, and speculative bets made with a line of credit opened under my name. Blythe paused. There is more. Of course there was. Corbin used the same device identifier to access the lender portal and the trading platform. The lender's preliminary log shows a Windows laptop with a browser fingerprint matching the one he used to send you those texts. Can they prove it was him? They can prove the activity came from the same device. They can prove the loan application was submitted from the same home internet address. The rest will depend on what the fraud unit obtains. I looked toward Poppy. She had moved on to drawing. Her head bent over the paper, her hair falling across one cheek. Did Corbin say anything after I sent the recording? I asked. Not to me. But Tamsin contacted my office. I sat back. What did she say? She asked whether the lender would call their home. She sounded surprised, which tells me she did not know the line of credit existed. The next morning, Tamsin found out. I learned the details later, when she sent Blythe a written statement. Corbin and Tamsin shared a narrow townhouse in Richmond, 3 bedrooms, 1 unfinished basement, and a kitchen table covered with their son's school papers. Their desktop computer sat in a small alcove beside the stairs because Corbin said he needed a workspace separate from the living room. At 7:06 that morning, an email notification appeared on the monitor. Subject: Urgent response required regarding account activity. Tamsin opened it because Corbin had left the computer unlocked. The first thing she saw was my name. The second thing she saw was the amount. $12,400. According to her statement, she stood in front of that screen for almost 4 minutes before Corbin came downstairs. What is this? She asked. Corbin stopped halfway down the stairs. Tamsin held up the printed email. What did you do? He did what people like Corbin always did when the facts arrived before they had time to build a story. He made the truth sound like a favor. Marlowe agreed to help, he said. Tamsin asked him when. He said, a while ago. She asked why he had never mentioned it. He said, because she has a better job than we do. She said it was temporary. That part was not even clever. It was the same sentence he had used when he borrowed $4,650 from me the year before. Temporary. Just until the commission check clears. Just until the deal closes. Just until next month. Tamsin looked at the email again. Then she asked whether he had used my name before. Corbin did not answer. That was when she remembered the luxury SUV lease from the previous spring. He had told her the dealership approved them because his regional sales role came with special corporate terms. The payments were $1,140 a month. Tamsin had signed nothing. But when she checked the lease packet, she found her name listed as an additional guarantor. She had never seen the document. She had never authorized it. By noon, she had pulled every credit report connected to her name. By 12:18, she had found the lease inquiry. By 12:24, she had found a second inquiry from a company called Horizon Ledger Services. The same company Blythe had identified in Corbin's transfer chain. That afternoon, Corbin went to work as if nothing had changed. He worked for a regional medical equipment distributor outside Richmond. His title was Senior Territory Manager, though his sales reports had been under review for 2 months. He had been inflating projected contracts, telling his supervisor that several hospital accounts were pending signature, when 2 of them had already chosen competitors. At 2:40 p.m., he stood near the break room coffee machine and told a junior representative that she was thinking too small because she had declined to put money into Northline. You have to be willing to move before everyone else moves, he said. The junior representative later told Tamsin that Corbin had laughed when she said she could not afford to gamble with rent money. "Then you will stay where you are," he told her. That was Corbin in one sentence. He did not want security. He wanted the appearance of being ahead of everyone else. At 6:11 p.m., Garrick called him. Tamsin heard most of the conversation from the laundry room because Corbin had put the phone on speaker. "You told me it was handled," Garrick said. Corbin's voice was lower than usual. "It was. She just found out. You used her name. I was going to replace the money. You were supposed to keep it contained, not drag your sister into it." The washing machine stopped spinning. For a few seconds, there was no sound at all. Then Corbin said, "You told me how to do it." Garrick did not deny it. That was the moment I stopped seeing Corbin as the whole problem. He was a grown man responsible for his choices, but he had learned secrecy from someone who had practiced it longer. At 11:03 that night, Blythe forwarded me a new document. A subpoena request draft. Attached beneath it was a single line from the lender's internal notes. "Account activity may involve additional related parties." I read it once. Then I looked at the streetlights outside the Valencia window. Somewhere in Richmond, my father had realized the lender was no longer looking at Corbin alone. Blythe called at 7:18 the next morning, which meant it was 1:18 in the afternoon in Valencia. Poppy was at the small table beside the balcony, eating toast cut into squares while she watched pigeons gather near the orange trees below. I had opened my laptop before she woke up. The lender's notice was still on the screen. Account activity may involve additional related parties. Blythe did not waste time. "I brought in Rhea Calder," she said. I knew the name. Rhea was a forensic accountant based in Richmond. She had spent 11 years reconstructing concealed assets, diverted funds, and false disclosures in civil fraud cases. Her reports were the kind lawyers attached when they wanted a judge to stop seeing a family dispute and start seeing a financial scheme. "Does she know the full file?" I asked. "She has the loan documents, the device logs, the transfer chain, and Tamsin's preliminary statement. She started at 6 this morning." "What did she find?" Blythe took a breath. "Corbin did not send all of that money into Northline." I looked at the blue tiles behind the sink. "Where did the rest go?" "To an account controlled by your father." For a moment, the apartment made no sound at all. Then Poppy dropped her spoon. It hit the tile floor with a small metallic click. I picked it up, rinsed it under the faucet, and placed it beside her plate. "What kind of account?" I asked. "An investment account held through a private brokerage. The title is in Garrick Bennett's name only. It was opened 23 months ago. 23 months. Nearly 2 years. Long before Thanksgiving. Long before Corbin's line of credit. Long before the first $380 vanished from the household account. Rhea had found 31 transfers. They were structured in amounts small enough to look ordinary if anyone saw only 1 month at a time. $700. $950. $1,200. $475. None of them large enough to trigger a family argument on their own. Together, they added up to $41,680. The transfers began on January 11th, 23 months earlier. I remembered that week. Dad had called me after dinner and asked whether I could help him organize some household accounts because Mom's wrist surgery had made paperwork difficult. He had sounded practical, almost embarrassed. "I just want to make things easier for your mother," he said. That had been the explanation. I had believed it because I wanted to. Rhea sent over the preliminary tracing report at 1:46 p.m. The document was 42 pages long. Page 12 showed the first transfer from Corbin's account to Garrick's brokerage account. Page 18 showed a withdrawal from the brokerage account 3 days later, routed to Northline Capital Exchange. Page 24 showed another deposit from the same brokerage account, this time into an entity called Bramble Ridge Holdings. The name meant nothing to me. Until Rhea called. "Bramble Ridge was the land deal," she said. I sat down at the kitchen table. "What land deal?" "The commercial parcel your father tried to purchase outside Petersburg 2 years ago. 14 acres near an undeveloped retail corridor." He put down a deposit, then the zoning approval stalled. I remembered hearing something about it at the time. Dad had called it a possible opportunity. He said a buyer was interested. He said the project would pay for itself. What happened? I asked. He lost the deposit, Ria said. Then he borrowed against projected resale value that never materialized. How much? According to the records we have, $52,000 from personal funds and a separate $86,000 home equity loan secured against the Ashford Hills house. I did not answer. Ria continued. The home equity loan closed 17 months ago. The application includes Rowena Bennett's signature. I looked toward the hall. Poppy was humming to herself, drawing a purple sun over the orange trees. Did she sign it? I asked. The signature comparison indicates she did not. Ria sent the scan page. The paper had the faint yellow cast of an older lender archive. My mother's name appeared at the bottom beside my father's. Rowena Bennett. But the letters leaned too far to the right. The loop in the R was too high. The final A did not taper the way my mother's handwriting always did. I knew because I had seen that signature on birthday cards, Christmas checks, school permission slips, and every note she had left on the refrigerator when I was growing up. The copy was close. Not close enough. Dad had borrowed $86,000 against the house my mother believed was safe. He had used my name to help Corbin access $12,400. He had used the household account to move funds in pieces. And he had kept doing it because every time someone asked a question, he had a family explanation ready. Temporary. A rough month. A misunderstanding. I thought about the way he had looked at me across the Thanksgiving table when I mentioned the loan. Not panic. Not surprise. Recognition. He had known exactly what I had found. He told me family meant trust, I said. Blythe was quiet on the line. What he meant was that family gave him people he could use. That afternoon, Ria reconstructed the sequence. After the land deal began collapsing, Garrick opened the brokerage account in his own name. He invited Corbin into the investment platform under the language of teaching him how money works. Corbin was already behind on bills and desperate to prove he could build something bigger than a sales commission. Garrick used that desperation. Corbin moved money from whatever sources he could touch. Household transfers. Credit cards. A lease application tied to Tamsin. Then my forged line of credit. Garrick collected portions of it, trying to keep the original investment account alive long enough to recover the land deal loss. The numbers did not recover. They multiplied. The trading losses expanded. The interest accrued. The home equity loan became a monthly payment no one had told my mother about. And every month, Dad kept pretending the family was fine. I wanted to be fair to him, because fairness matters even when people do not deserve it. Garrick had grown up with a father who lost a machine shop after taking on debt he could not repay. Dad had told that story at least 20 times over the years. He always described the shame of it, neighbors watching the inventory get hauled away, his mother pretending not to hear people whisper at church, his father sitting in the garage for weeks without speaking. Maybe that was why he feared failure so much. Maybe that was why he believed hiding it was better than admitting it. But fear did not explain forging Mom's signature. It did not explain using mine. And it did not explain teaching Corbin that secrecy was a form of survival. At 4:09 p.m., Blythe emailed the draft request for additional records. Brokerage statements. Home equity loan files. Property lien history. Account opening documents. All connected device logs. All internal banknotes. All communications between Garrick Bennett and Corbin Bennett related to the transfers. I read the list once. Then I opened a new message to Blythe. My fingers did not shake. I typed 6 words. Find every account. I sent it. At 4:26 p.m., my phone lit up with a voicemail from Rowena. I did not play it immediately. The transcription preview appeared beneath her name. Marlo, your father says there are things you do not understand. Please call me before Blythe does anything irreversible. I looked at the message for a long time. Then another notification arrived. This one was from Ria. She had found an account Garrick had not opened alone. Rowena called at 6:37 that evening. I was standing at the kitchen counter in Valencia, cutting strawberries into small pieces for Poppy. The apartment windows were open because the air had finally cooled, and somewhere below us, a scooter moved slowly down the street with its engine buzzing against the stone buildings. My phone lit up. Rowena Bennett. I let it ring twice. Then I answered. Marlo. Her voice sounded thinner than it had in the voicemail. Not softer. Just worn down around the edges. I want to see Poppy. She is finishing dinner. I want to talk to her. You can. There was a pause. Then Rowena said, I want to bring my granddaughter home. The knife stayed in my hand. Home. She belongs here. She belongs with me. You left in the middle of the night. You took her out of the country. You did not tell anyone where you were going. I sent my itinerary and address to my attorney before we boarded. That is not the same as telling your mother. No, I said. It is not. Poppy looked up from the table. She had a strawberry between 2 fingers and red juice on her thumb. Is that Grandma? Yes. Can I say hi? I handed her the phone. Hi, Grandma, Poppy said. Rowena's voice changed immediately. Hi, sweetheart. Are you eating? Strawberries. I miss you. Poppy looked at me before answering. I miss you too. The silence that followed was small but sharp. Then Rowena said, Put your mother back on. I took the phone. I want a video call, she said. Tonight. With Blythe present. That is ridiculous. It is the only way. Your father is sitting right here. Then Blythe should be there too. She exhaled into the receiver. At 7:15, we joined the call. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Blythe appeared in a separate square from her office in Richmond. Her blazer was still on, though the lights behind her had gone dim. She had a legal pad beside her and a stack of documents clipped together with a black binder clip. Then Rowena appeared. She was sitting in the dining room of the Ashford Hills house. The chandelier hung behind her, too large for the room, exactly as I remembered. The Thanksgiving centerpiece was gone, but there was still a faint dark mark on the tablecloth where cranberry sauce had dried and been wiped away too quickly. Garrick sat at the far end of the table. He did not look into the camera. Where is Poppy? Rowena asked. In the next room. I want to see her. She will come say goodnight before the call ends. Rowena pressed her lips together. You scared her, she said. I did not answer. She cried when she woke up last night, Rowena continued. She kept asking where you had taken her. I watched her face. You told her I was destroying the family? I told her you left. You called me 19 times after I arrived here. You did not answer. I was traveling with my daughter. Your father and I did not know if she was safe. She was sitting beside me while you were saying I had taken her. Garrick looked up then. This does not need to become a courtroom performance, he said. Blythe moved one document from the top of her stack. It became a legal matter when someone submitted a home equity loan application with a forged signature, she said. Rowena turned toward Blythe's square. What are you talking about? Blythe shared her screen. The loan application filled the center of the call. Home Equity Credit Agreement. Borrowers, Garrick Bennett and Rowena Bennett. Approved amount, $86,000. Closing date, June 14th. The scan page had that old yellow tint from lender archives. My father's signature sat above my mother's. Garrick Bennett. Rowena Bennett. Rowena leaned toward the screen. Her face changed slowly. Not dramatically. First, she stopped blinking. Then her hand moved to the base of her throat. Blythe opened the next document. A signature comparison chart. 12 known samples of Rowena's signature from bank checks, property tax forms, insurance renewals, and school forms she had signed years ago when Corbin and I were children. Beside them was the signature on the loan application. The difference was there if you knew what to look for. The letters tilted too far right. The final ended bluntly. The line beneath the name pressed down harder than Rowena ever did with a pen. Blythe spoke carefully. An independent document examiner concluded that the signature on the home equity loan application was not written by Rowena Bennett. It appears to have been reproduced using a prior signature sample. Rowena's breathing became audible through the microphone. Garrick leaned back in his chair. "This is a financial misunderstanding," he said. "Nothing more." Blythe looked directly into her camera. "Mr. Bennett, the lender's file includes a notarized closing packet, account opening documents, and a disbursement record. It is not a misunderstanding to obtain credit secured by jointly owned property without the knowledge or authorization of one of the owners. You are making it sound worse than it is." "No," Blythe said. "The documents are doing that." Rowena turned toward Garrick. "Did you take out a loan on the house?" He did not answer her. Instead, he looked at me. "You have been filling her head with nonsense from the other side of an ocean." I reached for the printed copy Blythe had sent me earlier that day. It was lying beside my laptop. The paper made a soft sound against the table when I lifted it. "Mom," I said. She looked at the screen. "Look at the signature. Did you sign that paper?" The call went still. Poppy was in the living room, humming softly to herself. The sound carried through the open doorway, gentle and out of place. Rowena looked down at the document again. Her mouth opened, then closed. She tried once more. "I do not remember signing that." Garrick's jaw tightened. "You signed plenty of papers over the years, Rowena." "That is not what I asked," I said. He turned toward the camera. "You do not get to interrogate your mother." "No, but I get to ask whether she gave you permission to borrow $86,000 against her home." Rowena's shoulders dropped. The answer was already there. Not in words. In the way she stared at the table. In the way her hand shook once before she pressed it flat against the polished wood. Garrick stood up. The chair legs scraped hard against the floor. "You will regret pulling strangers into family business," he said. Blythe did not move. "I am not a stranger," she said. "I am Ms. Bennett's counsel." Garrick reached for the laptop. Rowena said his name once. Garrick. But he shut the screen. The call ended. For several seconds, I sat in front of the black window where their faces had been. Then I closed my own laptop. Poppy came into the kitchen holding her dinosaur. "Mommy?" I turned toward her. She stood barefoot on the tile floor, the yellow blanket trailing behind her. "Is Grandpa in trouble?" I looked at the apartment around us. The blue tiles. The open balcony door. The strawberries still sitting in their bowl. "Grandpa made choices," I said. "Now people are asking him about them." Poppy nodded slowly. "Will Grandma be okay?" I took her hand. "I hope she decides to be." At 8:02 p.m., Blythe sent me a new message. Rhea found the joint account. The one my father had not opened alone. The letter arrived at 9:12 on a Monday morning. Blythe forwarded it to me while I was sitting at the small desk in the Valencia apartment, reviewing a logistics forecast for work. Poppy was at preschool for 3 hours that day. Her backpack had been too large for her shoulders, and she had waved at me twice before following her teacher through the blue gate. The quiet afterward felt wrong. Then Blythe's email appeared. Subject: Counsel letter from Garrick Bennett. I opened the attachment. Garrick had hired an attorney named Wallace Keene, a civil litigation partner from a Richmond firm with offices on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown. The letter accused me of removing sensitive family financial records without authorization, interfering with private household financial matters, and taking confidential documents from the Ashford Hills residence. It was written in the careful language of someone trying to make theft sound more believable than fraud. The letter did not mention the forged line of credit. It did not mention the $86,000 home equity loan. It did not mention the 31 structured transfers. It did not mention that the documents had come from accounts I had legal access to, records sent directly to me by the lender, or materials Corbin had placed in my name without permission. It only called me destructive. Blythe called 6 minutes later. "They are building a narrative," she said. "I can see that. They want the family to believe you took documents and disappeared with Poppy before anyone could question you." I looked out the window. Across the street, an older woman watered a row of plants on her balcony. A little brown dog sat near her feet and watched the water darken the soil. What do? We document the retaliation. Then we use it. That afternoon, Corbin added his version. He posted a photograph of the Ashford Hills house on social media. The front lawn was covered in thin winter leaves. The caption said, "Some people will take a child across the world and call it protection when all they really want is control." He did not use my name. He did not need to. Within an hour, 2 cousins had sent me messages. One said, "Please think about Poppy. She needs her grandparents." The other said, "Whatever happened, family is family." At 4:03 p.m., Aunt Livia called. I watched her name light up my screen. Then I let it ring. At 4:05, she called again. I answered on the 3rd ring because I had spent too many years making myself available to people who only contacted me when they wanted me to repair something. "Marlo," she said, "your mother is a wreck." "I know. She says you will not answer her." I answered her. "You sent her a recording." "Yes." Livia lowered her voice. "You need to make peace before this gets worse." I looked at the folder on my desk. Household receipts. I looked at the legal letter beside it. "Did anyone tell you about the forged loan?" There was a pause. "Your father says it is complicated." "It is not complicated." "Marlo, did anyone tell you that Corbin opened $12,400 in credit under my name?" Another pause. Longer this time. "No," she said. "Did anyone tell you Dad took an $86,000 loan against the house without Mom's signature?" The silence at the other end changed shape. "I did not know that." "No," I said. "You did not." She began to say something else. I ended the call. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I was scared again. Not of them. Of how easily people believed the version of me they had been selling for years. The difficult daughter. The controlling sister. The woman who could not let anything go. That version was easier to accept than the truth because it allowed everyone else to stay comfortable. Blythe sent me a calendar invitation for a hearing at Richmond Circuit Court the next morning. She had filed an emergency preservation order after Rhea discovered Garrick had tried to move money out of the investment account. At 2:13 a.m. Eastern Time, Garrick initiated a transfer of $28,600 from the brokerage account to a checking account belonging to a former business associate named Warren Clegg. Warren had been connected to the failed Petersburg land deal. The transfer description said, "Consulting reimbursement." Rhea cross-referenced Warren's account records against the old land deal documents and found no contract, no invoice, no tax form, and no documented service worth $28,600. Just a transfer made after Garrick learned the accounts were being reviewed. Blythe's message was waiting beneath the court notice. "They are trying to turn your escape into evidence against you because they know the actual evidence is against them." The next morning, the Richmond Circuit Court granted the emergency preservation order. The order froze the remaining funds in Garrick's investment account, prohibited transfers involving the disputed home equity proceeds, and required both Garrick and Corbin to preserve all electronic communications, devices, banking records, and account credentials related to the financial activity under review. It was not a final ruling. It was not justice. It was a locked door. And for the first time, they were standing on the wrong side of it. At 6:48 that evening, Tamsin emailed me from an address I did not recognize. The subject line read, "You need to see this." There was no message in the body. Only 14 screenshots. I opened the first one. The messages were between Garrick and Corbin. The timestamps were pale gray against the dark background. 2:13 a.m. 2:17 a.m. 2:21 a.m. The first message from Corbin said, "She will notice if I use the account again." Garrick replied, "Then use the old signature from the vehicle file. She never reads what she signs." I read it twice. Then I opened the next screenshot. Corbin wrote, "What if Mom finds out?" Garrick replied, "Your mother sees what she wants to see. Keep it that way." The third screenshot showed the message that ended any remaining excuse. Corbin wrote, "Marlo will lose it." Garrick replied, "She will complain, then she will calm down. She always does." I sat at the desk without moving. The apartment had gone dark around me. I had not turned on the overhead light. The only illumination came from the laptop screen, blue and cold against the walls. 14 screenshots. 14 pieces of proof that my father had not simply covered for Corbin. He had instructed him. He had chosen the documents. He had named the weakness he thought I would never outgrow. She always does. I saved each image to the encrypted drive. Then I forwarded the email to Blythe and Rhea. At 7:16 p.m., Blythe replied. This changes the case. At 7:19, Rhea added one line beneath it. And it explains the joint account. I stared at that sentence. The account Garrick had not opened alone. The account Rowena might not know existed. I closed the laptop carefully. Then I heard Poppy turn over in her room. Her blanket rustled once against the sheets. I stood up and walked toward her door. Because leaving had kept us safe. But it had not ended anything. Not yet. The settlement conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. Richmond time. In Valencia, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Poppy was at preschool. I had walked her there myself, watched her hand disappear into her teacher's, then returned to the apartment and set my laptop on the kitchen table. I wore a white blouse, dark pants, and the small gold earrings Adrian had given me the first Christmas after Poppy was born. Not because I wanted to look impressive. Because I wanted to look like myself. At 3:54, Blythe joined the video conference from the Richmond Circuit Court Mediation Center. Behind her, a glass wall reflected rows of ceiling lights and the edge of a long conference table. Rhea sat beside her with 3 binders stacked in front of her. Across the room, my parents and Corbin were already seated. Garrick wore the gray suit he had bought for Corbin's wedding. His hands rested flat on the table, one over the other, like he had come to negotiate a property line dispute instead of explain why he had forged my name. Rowena sat 2 seats away from him. She looked smaller than she had during our last video call. Her hair was pinned back too tightly. A paper cup of water sat untouched in front of her. Corbin leaned against the back of his chair. He wore no jacket. His shirt collar was open, and he kept checking his phone until the mediator told him to place it face down. Tamsin sat at the far end of the table with her own attorney. She did not look at Corbin once. The mediator introduced himself as Harold Vance, a former judge who had spent 13 years handling commercial and family-adjacent financial disputes. He spoke with the calm precision of someone who had seen people lie to themselves in better rooms than this one. This conference is not a trial, he said. It is an opportunity to determine whether any resolution is possible before the fraud allegations expand into additional proceedings. Garrick nodded as if he had been waiting for someone reasonable to enter the room. Exactly, he said. This is a family misunderstanding. It has been inflated because my daughter feels she was treated unfairly at Thanksgiving. I watched him through the screen. The same voice. The same measured rhythm. The same habit of placing himself in the center of a story he had damaged. Corbin leaned forward. I already said I will repay the $12,400, he said. It was temporary. I got in over my head. I can make monthly payments. He said it as if $12,400 were the entire issue. As if the forged signature had been a parking ticket. As if the home equity loan did not exist. As if my father had not instructed him to use an old copy of my handwriting. Blythe folded her hands. Mr. Bennett, the $12,400 line of credit is not the full matter before us, she said. Rhea opened the first binder. The sound of paper moving through plastic sleeves carried clearly through the microphone. Then the screen behind Blythe changed. A chart appeared. 47 transactions. 23 months. 3 account pathways. The forensic debt map filled the wall behind them. Rows of dates. Transfer amounts. Account identifiers. Arrows connecting the household account, Corbin's personal accounts, Garrick's private brokerage account, Bramble Ridge Holdings, Northline Capital Exchange, and the $86,000 home equity loan. The map made the situation look exactly like what it was. Not confusion. Not bad timing. A system. Rhea stood. Transaction 1 occurred January 11th, 23 months ago, she said. A transfer of $700 from the household account to Corbin Bennett's account. Within one day, $650 of that amount was transferred to an investment account controlled by Garrick Bennett. Garrick looked down. Rhea continued. Over the following 23 months, we traced 47 transactions involving household funds, consumer credit, private brokerage activity, and a home equity credit line secured against the Ashford Hills residence. Corbin shifted in his chair. His attorney whispered something to him. Rhea pointed to the second section of the map. 31 of those transactions were structured under $1,500. The pattern is consistent with deliberate fragmentation. The funds were moved in amounts unlikely to attract attention from a casual review. Garrick looked at the mediator. This is financial jargon. My wife and I shared accounts. My son needed help. Families move money around. Rhea did not react. Families do move money around, she said. They do not typically reproduce a spouse's signature to secure $86,000 in debt against jointly owned property. The room went quiet. Rowena looked at the screen. Her eyes moved from the loan figure to the address beneath it. The Ashford Hills house. The house she had lived in for 24 years. The house where she had hung Christmas stockings for both of us. The house where she had told me, 6 weeks before Thanksgiving, that I was lucky to have a family home to come back to. Her mouth opened slightly. If that loan is not paid, she said, almost too quietly for the microphone to catch, they can take the house? Rhea looked at her. If the account defaults and no other resolution is reached, the lender can pursue remedies against the collateral. Rowena turned to Garrick. You told me the land deal was over. It is over, he said. You told me we were fine. We are fine. She looked back at the map. There was a line connecting the home equity loan to Garrick's brokerage account. Another connecting it to Northline. A third leading into Bramble Ridge Holdings. Nothing about it looked fine. Garrick leaned closer to her. Do not make this bigger than it needs to be. Rowena's fingers tightened around the paper cup. The lid bent slightly. Blythe placed the Thanksgiving recording on the table. It was not playing yet. The file name was visible on the screen. Thanksgiving_audio_43M18S. The mediator looked at me. Ms. Bennett, he said, what would you require to consider settlement? I had prepared for that question. Not because I wanted a settlement. Because I knew they would expect me to be grateful for one. I looked at my father. Then at Corbin. Then at my mother. You asked me to apologize for telling the truth, I said. Today, I am asking you to answer for it. No one spoke. I continued. I will not sign a settlement unless there is complete financial disclosure. Every account. Every transfer. Every debt obligation. Every entity connected to my father, my brother, or anyone who received funds from them. Garrick's attorney shifted in his seat. I kept going. I want the forged credit line voided. I want the home equity loan reviewed independently. I want the lender records preserved. I want all devices and messages related to my signature, my name, or my financial information produced. And I want no contact with Poppy unless it is arranged through counsel. Corbin gave a short laugh. You are trying to destroy us. I looked at him. No. I am refusing to help you hide. That was the part they had never understood. They had spent years making me feel like the difficult one. Sitting there, I realized I was only difficult because I was the first person who refused to lie for them. The mediator looked down at his notes. Then he looked at Garrick. Mr. Bennett, can you provide a complete disclosure of all accounts and entities within 7 days? Garrick did not answer immediately. His silence said more than any denial could have. Finally, he said, I will discuss that with counsel. Blythe closed her binder. Rhea placed one hand over the debt map. The conference had lasted 43 minutes. Exactly the length of the recording my father had spent telling me to apologize or leave. At 4:47 p.m. Valencia time, the mediator called for a recess. The screen went dark one square at a time. Blythe disconnected last. Before she did, she said, Marlo, do not answer anyone tonight. I will not. Rhea found something while we were in the room. What? Blythe's expression changed. Not surprise. Confirmation. There is another account, she said. And this one is in Rowena's name. The conference resumed at 10:30 the following morning. It was late afternoon in Valencia. Poppy was in the living room with her crayons, drawing circles on the back of an old grocery receipt while I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Blythe appeared first. Rhea was beside her again, but this time there was someone new at the Richmond table, a woman in a charcoal suit with a black leather portfolio and a federal-looking calm that made everyone else sit straighter. Blythe introduced her as Dana Mercer, a senior fraud investigator assigned by the lender after the preservation order had been entered. Garrick's attorney looked annoyed. This was supposed to be a settlement conference, he said. Dana did not look at him. It still is, the mediator replied. But the lender has a right to observe matters involving its records, its collateral, and alleged misuse of credit. Garrick folded his hands. Then he looked directly into the camera. This has gone far beyond what it should have been, he said. My daughter is angry because she was asked to show respect to her parents. That is all this is. I did not interrupt him. He had spent most of my life speaking as if the first person to control the room controlled the truth. Corbin sat beside him, pale and restless. He kept rubbing the side of his thumb with his index finger. Tamsin was at the far end of the table, her attorney beside her, a sealed manila envelope resting in front of her. Rowena had not changed seats. But she looked different. Her hair was loose around her face now. The paper cup from the day before had been replaced by a bottle of water she had not opened. Blythe turned toward the mediator. Before any settlement discussion continues, she said, we are requesting that the Thanksgiving recording be entered into the conference record. Garrick's attorney objected immediately. This is a family dinner recording. It has no relevance to financial disclosures. Blythe did not raise her voice. It establishes the response to Ms. Bennett raising the disputed financial conduct. It also establishes that the alleged wrongdoing was not a misunderstanding discovered after the fact. It was actively suppressed. The mediator looked at Garrick. Any objection beyond relevance? Garrick's jaw tightened. No, Blythe pressed play. For the first few seconds, the room heard only silverware. A fork against a plate. A glass placed down too hard. The distant sound of Poppy's toy dinosaur scraping across hardwood. Then Rowena's voice came through the conference room speakers. Are you still sending Poppy to preschool? I keep telling you, a little girl needs her mother, not strangers raising her. I watched my father's face. He did not move. The recording continued. My own voice came next, steady and quiet. I work because I need to and because I want to. Then Corbin laughed. Not loudly. That was what made it worse. A small sound, half buried beneath the clink of a spoon, as though my life had been a private joke he expected everyone else to understand. The recording moved forward. My voice named the missing money. The $12,400 loan. The transfers. The accounts. Then Garrick's voice filled the room. Apologize to your brother or pack your things and leave this house. No one spoke after that. The air in the Valencia apartment felt thinner somehow. Poppy had stopped coloring. She was looking at me from the living room doorway, one purple crayon held loosely in her hand. I gave her a small nod. She went back to her paper. The recording continued for another minute. It captured Corbin dismissing me. It captured Garrick cutting me off when I tried to mention the loan. It captured my chair scraping against the floor. Then Blythe stopped it. 43 minutes and 18 seconds reduced to a room that had gone completely still. Garrick's attorney leaned toward him and whispered something. Garrick did not respond. Tamsin picked up the manila envelope. My attorney has additional evidence, she said. Her voice shook once, then settled. She removed printed copies of the 14 screenshots and slid them toward the mediator. These are messages between Garrick and Corbin, she said. I found them after the lender contacted our home. I verified the timestamps against the device backup. The mediator looked through the pages. Dana Mercer leaned forward. Rhea watched without blinking. Corbin finally spoke. Dad told me it would be fine. Garrick turned toward him so quickly his chair shifted against the floor. Do not say another word. Corbin's face tightened. You told me she never reads what she signs, he said. You told me Mom would not notice. You told me to use the vehicle file. Garrick looked at him with open disgust. You do not know how to keep your mouth shut. That sentence landed harder than an admission. Because he did not deny it. He only blamed Corbin for saying it aloud. Rowena had been staring at the debt map on the screen. Now she looked at Garrick. Did you use the house to cover the losses? He said nothing. Garrick, she said again. His eyes moved toward the attorney. Then to the mediator. Then back to her. Rowena's voice changed. It did not rise. It simply stopped asking for permission. You told me she was the problem. But it was you. Nobody moved. My mother sat across from the man she had defended at every holiday table, every family argument, every time he described me as difficult or cold or ungrateful. She looked at him now as if she were seeing the shape of her own house for the first time. Dana Mercer opened her portfolio. The lender will be separating this matter from the settlement process, she said. The potential misuse of authorization, the disputed signature, the account activity, and the related transfers will proceed through an independent fraud review. Garrick's attorney sat up. Ms. Mercer, surely this can be resolved privately. No, Dana said. Not based on the current record. She placed a document on the table. The lender will also require additional preservation of devices, cloud backups, banking credentials, and communications connected to the disputed transactions. Corbin stared at the page. Tamsin looked down. Rowena closed her eyes for a moment. And Garrick sat there, silent, in the same mediation room where he had arrived believing he could explain his way past every question. I did not feel victorious when my mother said it. I felt sad. But sadness was no longer enough to make me go back. Blythe muted herself briefly and called my phone. I answered. Do not react yet, she said. Rhea found the account in Rowena's name. I know. There is something else in it. What? Blythe paused. Then she said, a transfer dated 2 days before Thanksgiving. And it came from someone neither Garrick nor Corbin has mentioned. I looked at the frozen image of my family on the laptop screen. For the first time, my father looked uncertain. And I knew the story was not finished. The fraud notice arrived 3 business days after the mediation conference. Blythe sent it to me at 8:06 in the morning Valencia time, while Poppy stood beside the kitchen counter waiting for me to cut her banana into small moons. The document was 6 pages long, printed on lender letterhead, with a case reference number at the top and a list of records the bank intended to review. Garrick Bennett. Corbin Bennett. All accounts connected to the disputed line of credit. All records connected to the $86,000 home equity loan. All communications involving the application, the signatures, the transfers, and the brokerage activity. I read the first page while Poppy hummed to herself. Then I cut the banana into 12 pieces and placed them in her blue bowl. Did I get the right number? She asked. You did. She counted them twice. That was how justice arrived. Not with a slammed door. Not with anyone raising their voice. It arrived in numbered exhibits, preservation notices, and deadlines no one could charm their way around. The lender voided the personal line of credit in my name 2 days later. The notice stated that the account had been closed. The disputed balance of $12,400 had been removed from my credit file pending the final fraud review, and all adverse reporting connected to the account would be suppressed while the investigation continued. Blythe called me after it came through. Check your credit monitoring report, she said. I did. The account that had sat there like a stain for months was gone. Not forgiven. Not paid off. Removed. For the first time since I found the application, I could look at my own financial profile without seeing Corbin's choices attached to my name. At 11:30 that same morning, Corbin's employer placed him on administrative suspension. His company had been reviewing inflated sales projections before the lender inquiry began. Once the fraud matter reached their compliance department, they expanded the review to include his expense reports, vehicle reimbursement claims, and corporate card activity. They found $7,860 in unsupported travel charges over 8 months. Hotel nights logged in cities where no client meeting had occurred. Meals billed as regional account development on weekends. A rental car upgrade in Tamsin's name that had been submitted as a business expense. Corbin had always been good at making excess look like ambition. His company did not see it that way. Tamsin called Blythe first. She did not call me. That was fair. She had spent years living in the same house as Corbin without knowing what he had placed in her name. She was entitled to tell her own story before anyone else turned it into evidence. But she sent me a message that night. I took Eli to my sister's. I found the lease paperwork. That was all. No dramatic explanation. No request for comfort. Just the fact. Later, Blythe told me Tamsin had found the luxury SUV lease inside a locked file cabinet in the townhouse office. Corbin had listed her as an additional guarantor using a scanned signature from their mortgage pre-approval packet. The monthly payment was $1,140. The remaining lease obligation was more than $28,000. Tamsin packed one overnight bag for herself, one for Eli, and took the framed family photo from the hallway because her son kept asking for it. Then she left. Garrick did not leave. He stayed in the Ashford Hills house while his lawyers prepared the asset disclosure packet ordered through the preservation process. The packet eventually reached 114 pages. Investment accounts, brokerage statements, credit card balances, the Bramble Ridge Holdings records, the home equity loan, the household transfers, the account in Rowena's name. That last account held a balance of $9,480. Ria's tracing report showed the transfer into it had occurred 2 days before Thanksgiving. The sender was not Garrick. It was Warren Clegg, the former business associate connected to the failed Petersburg land deal. The payment memo read, "Return of reserve funds." There was no invoice, no underlying contract, no evidence that Rowena had known it existed, and no explanation Garrick's attorney was willing to put in writing. Rowena hired her own lawyer the following week. Her name was Celeste Wynn. She practiced marital property and financial protection law in Richmond, and she filed a formal notice that Rowena was independently represented in all matters involving the Ashford Hills property, the home equity loan, and any account opened or funded without her authorization. When Blythe told me, I sat on the balcony outside the apartment with a cup of coffee cooling between my hands. Below me, Poppy was chasing pigeons through the park with another child from preschool. Her yellow jacket flashed between the benches. My mother had spent most of my life standing beside my father when he spoke. Now she had hired someone to stand across from him. It did not erase the years she had looked away. It did not change Thanksgiving. But it was the first decision she had made that did not require his permission. The settlement proposal arrived on a Thursday. 26 pages. It offered repayment of the $12,400 line of credit, statutory interest, my documented legal fees, and a provision that Garrick and Corbin would have no direct contact with Poppy unless communication went through counsel. Blythe read the terms to me over a video call. "It is a strong offer," she said. "Financially. What is the condition?" She paused. "Confidentiality." I opened the document. Section 14 was titled Non-Disparagement and Confidentiality. The language required me to keep the fraud allegations, the documents, the investigation, and the settlement terms private. It also required me to refrain from sharing the Thanksgiving recording with anyone other than legal counsel. They wanted repayment. They wanted closure. And they wanted silence. The same silence they had demanded at the dinner table. The same silence that had allowed Garrick to tell people I was difficult, Corbin to call his theft temporary, and Rowena to call evidence paperwork. Blythe waited. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I looked down at the proposal. The paper lay perfectly still on the table. "You do not get to ask me for silence after you spent years using mine against me." Blythe did not reply right away. Then she said, "I will communicate that." The rejection went out at 2:18 p.m. Richmond time. At 4:03, Garrick's attorney asked for a revised conference. At 5:11, the lender issued a supplemental fraud notice requiring full cooperation from all account holders. At 6:26, Garrick agreed to complete disclosure. Every account, every debt, every entity, every transfer. His electronic signature appeared line by line on the disclosure agreement while I watched from Valencia. Garrick Bennett. Garrick Bennett. Garrick Bennett. Each signature looked smaller than the one before it. I had thought justice would feel loud. Instead, it arrived in documents, deadlines, and signatures they could not talk their way around. That evening, Poppy fell asleep with her dinosaur tucked under her chin. I stood in the doorway and watched her breathe for a few minutes before returning to the kitchen. My phone was waiting on the counter. One unread email. From Rowena. The subject line was only 4 words. I need to tell you. For months after Garrick signed the full disclosure agreement, Rowena moved out of the Ashford Hills house. I learned about it from Blythe. She called on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting outside a cafe near Rizafa, waiting for Poppy's preschool class to finish their walk through the park. The sky was clear, and the waiter had placed a glass of water beside my coffee without asking because I had been there enough times for him to remember. Rowena retained separate counsel, Blythe said. She and Garrick are formally separated. I watched a woman push a stroller past the cafe window. Where did he go? An apartment near his old office in Richmond. 1 bedroom. Month-to-month lease. That sounded smaller than the life he had spent years defending. The Ashford Hills house had always been his proof that he had done everything right. The brick exterior. The wide porch. The dining room with the chandelier too large for the ceiling. The framed family photographs arranged in exact rows along the hall. Now he was living in a rented apartment near a strip mall and a commuter road. Blythe did not say that to make me feel better. She said it because consequences were part of the record. Corbin's consequences came in slower pieces. He sold the luxury SUV after Tamsin's attorney filed notice that she had not authorized the lease guarantee. The dealership repossessed nothing. There was no dramatic tow truck in the middle of the night. Corbin listed the vehicle himself, accepted less than he owed, and carried the remaining balance into the financial disclosures. He was still under review at work. His suspension had become unpaid leave. The lender's fraud process had moved into a formal investigation stage, and the civil matter involving the forged line of credit had not been resolved. His attorney had advised him not to speak publicly. His social media accounts went quiet. For years, Corbin had treated silence as something he imposed on other people. Now it had been imposed on him. I did not celebrate any of it. I had no reason to. By then, Poppy had started at an international preschool in Valencia. Her teacher's name was Ines, and she wore bright scarves and carried a ring of keys that jingled whenever she walked through the hallway. Poppy had made a friend named Lucia, a little girl with dark curls and a red backpack covered in patches. Every morning, Poppy ran through the gate without looking back. The first week, I stood there after she disappeared into the classroom, waiting for my body to react the way it used to whenever she was out of sight. It did not. No phone vibrating with Rowena's name. No message from Garrick demanding an answer. No Corbin trying to turn an emergency into a favor. Just a courtyard, children's voices, and the smell of oranges from the trees near the fence. 2 months later, I accepted a remote position with a European logistics consultancy based in Madrid. The work was more stable than my old role in Richmond. The hours made sense. My team cared about deadlines, reports, and freight volumes, not whether I was available to absorb someone else's crisis after dinner. The offer came with a contract, a salary increase, and a clear line between my work and my private life. I signed it at the same kitchen table where I had first opened the folder called Household Receipts. That night, I slept until 6:14 a.m. No sudden waking. No checking my phone before my eyes had fully opened. No fear that a new message would contain another accusation, another emergency, another demand disguised as concern. Leaving did not erase what happened. It simply gave me enough distance to understand that I was allowed to survive it. The letter arrived on a Friday. The envelope was cream-colored and folded at the edges. I recognized Rowena's handwriting before I even opened it. The letters were careful, rounded, and slightly tilted left. There was a faint trace of the same perfume she had worn for every Thanksgiving dinner since I was a child. Inside were 6 handwritten pages. I did not read them immediately. I left the envelope on the kitchen table for 2 days. Saturday morning, Poppy spilled cereal beside it. Saturday night, I moved it so I could set down a bowl of soup. Sunday afternoon, I finally sat alone on the balcony and opened the first page. Rowena did not ask me to forgive her. That was the first honest thing she had written. She said she had noticed changes in Garrick years earlier. The late-night calls. The unexplained transfers. The way he became irritated whenever she asked about paperwork. She wrote that she had seen Corbin return from meetings with my father looking pale and defensive, then act like nothing had happened. She had noticed. And she had looked away. She wrote that she thought keeping the family together meant refusing to inspect the cracks. She wrote that when I mentioned the loan at Thanksgiving, she knew from Garrick's face that something was wrong. But she still chose to defend him. She still chose the version of the family that required me to be the problem. I read every page once. Then I folded the letter and placed it back inside the envelope. For 3 days, I did not answer. Blythe asked whether I wanted her to respond through counsel. No, I told her. Not yet. On the 4th morning, Poppy came into the kitchen wearing mismatched socks and carrying a drawing from school. "It's us," she said. The picture showed 2 people standing under a yellow sun. One had long brown hair. The other had a red backpack. "Are we happy?" I asked. Poppy thought about it. Then she nodded. "Yes, we're in our new home." I placed the drawing on the refrigerator. After she left for school, I sat at the table and opened a blank email. I did not write a long reply. There was nothing left to explain. I wrote, "I can forgive what you are willing to face. I cannot return to what you still want me to deny." Then I added one final sentence. "I hope you choose the truth now, even when it costs you." I sent it at 9:17 a.m. For the rest of the day, my phone stayed quiet. At 6:40 that evening, Blythe sent me one message. "The final settlement agreement is ready for your signature." I looked toward the balcony. The sun was beginning to lower over the rooftops. And for the first time, I understood that the last document would not be the end of my story. It would be proof that I had finally stopped living inside theirs.